Get comfortable not owning games. A sentence that put the final nail in the coffin for Ubisoft. Once a well-respected game developer is now one of the most greedy companies in the industry. And with their stock price going down by over 80% in the last 5 years, they've resorted to some odd ways to take advantage of the few fans that they have left. Ubisoft is a French video game publisher founded by the 5 Guillemot brothers. The first ever game that they made was Zombie in 1986, the same year that the company was founded. But the first game that really put them on the map was Rayman, which released in 1995, and by the end of 97 it sold 900,000 copies. But the game that really got them attention was Assassin's Creed, released in 2007, and it played a major role in Ubisoft's come up and maybe even a role in their downfall. Assassin's Creed was an open world action game that people just loved. It was praised for its unique setting, good story, and its innovative gameplay. Then in Assassin's Creed 2, all of the things that were good in the first game were improved on. Ubisoft had a unique formula, and instead of building on it, they pretty much just did the same thing for the rest of the franchise. Just was different main characters, different time periods, and just different settings. The newest Assassin's Creed game seemed very okay. I was honestly very interested in the game because I like that sort of style of play, but when I saw people play it, it just looked so boring. Like there was just nothing to do. It's not like it was a bad game, it just wasn't anything special, and I feel like that statement goes for a lot of Ubisoft games and their other franchises. I think they've just pretty much given up on what I would say is their more popular IPs, being Rayman, the game that got them started in the first place. I honestly don't know much about Rayman. The last Rayman game I played was Rayman Legends. Funnily enough, it's the last actual Rayman game that was released. They have had others, but Rayman Fiesta Run, Rayman Adventures, and Rayman Mini are all mobile games, and the last of those mobile games was made in 2019, so it's been a long time. There are other IPs that I'm not really mentioning, like Far Cry, Ghost Recon, and Watch Dogs, because I pretty much know next to nothing about them. I know Far Cry, the last thing I heard was the newest game was probably the worst. You know, it's just the same thing over and over again. They just don't get better as time goes on. The only other Ubisoft game that I know about is Siege, and that game is somehow just getting worse and worse as time goes on. But Ubisoft pretty much does the same thing with every game that they release. They have a franchise that's well received, then they milk the franchise and pretty much give up on changing anything about them. Even standalone games like Avatar Frontiers of Pandora and Star Wars Outlaws follow the same Ubisoft formula. Not necessarily a bad game, it's just another open world that's very tedious and empty. And that's not even close to the worst part. Ubisoft, in my opinion, is the second most greedy game company, and it's only losing to Nintendo. The way they treat their fan base is honestly very sad. It first started with forcing online play, which just means for single player games, you have to have an internet connection, which is just stupid. Ubisoft, of course, has had plenty of microtransactions, but realistically, everyone does at this point. But now Ubisoft wants to hit a new low. They want to start pushing subscription-based services for their games. Like I said at the start, get comfortable with not owning games. That was said from the director of subscriptions over at Ubisoft. I have to read this whole thing. It is just the most out of touch thing that I have ever heard. One of the things we saw is that gamers are used to, a little bit like DVDs, having and owning their games. That's the consumer shift that needs to happen. They got comfortable not owning their CD collections or DVD collection. That's a transaction that's been a bit slower to happen. As gamers grow comfortable in that aspect, you don't lose your progress. If you resume your game at another time, your progress file is still there. That's not been deleted. You don't lose what you've built in the game or your engagement with the game. So it's about feeling comfortable with not owning your game. What? The most troll-filled, greedy company ever. What sort of person would be okay and happy to do this? Who is buying Ubisoft Premium blah blah whatever plus garbage? Nobody's buying that. And I get that game companies don't want people pirating games anymore, but when you say stupid shit like this, what do you expect? If you spend money to play a game that you don't own, then pirating that game isn't stealing. And it's not like it's for good games either. You're paying money for some of the biggest game flops of recent times. And speaking of the biggest flops, I have to talk about Skull and Bones. That game is years and years of waiting and promises. It was announced all the way back in 2017, which is 2 years away from being 10 years old, and it didn't release until 2024. Almost 10 years of waiting, and for it to be the most Ubisoft made game ever. Open world, nothing to do, a waste of almost 10 years and $70. There was apparently tons of issues with development, restarting and scrapping the game multiple times, different parts of Ubisoft Studios. It was just a mess. Obviously, it had awful reviews because I feel like they released it and it wasn't even a finished game. And I also want to take this time to mention that they tried to pull a Logan Paul and they made NFTs. Yeah. They hit that low too. The next thing I'm going to speak on is a lot more serious than everything else, and I don't really like to talk about overly serious stuff in my videos, but it is a very recent thing that has just come up and part of why I wanted to make this video. Unfortunately, like a lot of game companies, 3 former Ubisoft executives are on trial for probably I'm going to bleep that, but you can read. The 3 of them were all accused for one of them quit and the 2 others were fired. They all denied the claims. It's unfortunately just not a surprise at this point. It's a common thing in game companies and realistically probably just companies in general. I'm looking at you, Activision. And that leaves Ubisoft now in just a weird place. I feel like they're just one thing away from going out of business. Like I said, look at their stock price. And there's really nothing they could do to just be in that top spot again. Like they're not gonna sit there and compete with AAA studios. They're just kind of stuck in the limbo of not being interesting enough to lead and not even being consistent enough to keep up with other AAA studios. They're losing to indie developers at this point. They've lost all their respect, they've lost their innovation, creativity, and now they're starting to lose the last of their fan base that they have left. But that is all I have for you today. Let me know of some other videos that you would like to see from me. Also, like I've said in the last 2 videos, we are very close to 1,000 subscribers. Hopefully I can hit it before this video even goes out, but YouTube is kind of screwing me over with my recent videos. As always though, I hope you all enjoyed and peace.